Velociraptor pack faces T-Rex. What happens next will leave everyone in tears. How will this story unfold? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. The dense jungle trembled with a quiet intensity as the Velociraptor pack skulked through the underbrush. Their lithe forms, sleek and muscular, moved like shadows under the dappled sunlight filtering through the thick canopy above. Each step was calculated, their claws barely scraping the soft earth. The pack leader, a massive female named Sira, led the way with her piercing amber eyes scanning for danger or opportunity. Behind her, the younger members of the pack, including a sprightly juvenile named Covey, tried to match her stealth, though their enthusiasm occasionally betrayed them. Covey, in particular, had trouble suppressing his excitement, his quick jerks and swivels of his head betraying his youth. "Stay close," Sira growled softly without turning back, her voice barely audible above the faint rustling of leaves. The raptors were hungry, ravenous, even. A series of failed hunts had left the pack desperate, their usually well-coordinated teamwork frayed by fatigue. Prey in this part of the jungle had become scarce, and the looming threat of larger predators had forced them deeper into unknown territory. The last time they had attempted to bring down a herd of Parasaurolophus, the attempt ended in disaster when a rogue Ankylosaurus appeared, scattering the herd and nearly taking out one of the older pack members with its club-like tail. Now the pack moved as one, their hunger sharpening their senses. The air was thick with tension, every sound and movement amplifying the anticipation of their next hunt. Sira stopped abruptly, her head tilting as her nostrils flared. The rest of the pack halted in unison, instinctively lowering themselves into the foliage. "Something's close," she murmured, her claws flexing. From their left, a rustling sound grew louder. The pack stiffened, their eyes darting to Sira for guidance. She signaled with a flick of her tail, and the pack spread out in a semicircle, preparing to encircle whatever was approaching. The tension was palpable, their hunger and desperation driving their every move. Then the rustling stopped. The jungle fell eerily silent, the kind of silence that made the raptors' hearts pound in unison. Covey, unable to contain his curiosity, crept forward slightly, his bright eyes scanning the dense vegetation. Sira shot him a warning glance, her tail stiffening in irritation. But before she could reprimand him, a low, guttural growl shattered the silence. The sound was unmistakable. It was deep, primal, and filled with menace. The pack froze as their instincts screamed at them to retreat, but their hunger forced them to hold their ground. From the underbrush, the ground seemed to shake ever so slightly, a rhythmic vibration that grew stronger with each passing moment. And then it appeared. The towering form of a Tyrannosaurus Rex emerged from the jungle like a nightmare made flesh. Its enormous head swung from side to side, its sharp teeth glinting as its yellow eyes locked onto the pack. The T-Rex's massive frame cast a shadow over the raptors, its sheer size dwarfing them entirely. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as predator faced predator, the air thick with the weight of impending violence. Sira hissed low and sharp, signaling the pack to retreat. But the T-Rex wasn't here to let them leave unchallenged. With a thunderous roar, it charged forward, its massive feet shaking the ground with each step. The pack scattered, their sleek bodies darting in different directions as the T-Rex lunged at them with terrifying speed. Covey, who had been closest to the T-Rex, barely escaped its snapping jaws, the wind from its movement knocking him off balance. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as he darted towards Sira, who was leading the pack away from the beast. "Move, Covey!" she snarled, her voice filled with urgency. The pack zigzagged through the jungle, their movements chaotic but synchronized enough to keep them out of the T-Rex's reach. The beast pursued them relentlessly, its powerful strides closing the distance with terrifying ease. Trees and underbrush snapped like twigs under its weight, the sounds of destruction echoing through the forest. But the raptors were agile, and their smaller size allowed them to slip through narrow spaces that the T-Rex couldn't navigate. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might escape. However, as they emerged into a small clearing, The T-Rex burst through the trees behind them, its bellowing roar shaking the very ground beneath their feet. Sira realized they had no choice but to fight. She hissed sharply, signaling the pack to form a defensive circle. The raptors moved quickly, their claws and teeth bared as they faced the massive predator. Covey trembled as he took his position, his youthful enthusiasm replaced with raw fear. The T-Rex slowed its advance, its massive head tilting as it observed the pack's formation. It seemed almost amused, its lips curling back to reveal its dagger-like teeth. Then, with a bone-rattling roar, it charged at them again. The pack scattered, each member attacking from a different angle. Sira leapt onto the T-Rex's flank, her claws digging into its thick hide as she tried to climb toward its vulnerable neck. Two of the older raptors attacked its legs, their teeth snapping at its powerful muscles in an attempt to slow it down. Covey hesitated, his instincts warring with his fear. "Covey now!" Sira shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Gathering his courage, Covey lunged at the T-Rex's tail, his claws scratching at the base of its spine. The beast roared in anger, whipping its tail around to throw him off. Covey was sent flying, his small body slamming into a nearby tree. Pain exploded through him, but he forced himself to get up, his determination overriding his agony. The battle raged on, the raptors working as a team to exploit the T-Rex's weaknesses. But it was a losing fight. The T-Rex's sheer power and size were overwhelming, and the pack's energy was fading fast. One by one, they were forced to retreat, their injuries making it impossible to continue the fight. Sira was the last to fall back, her body battered and bloodied. She growled at the T-Rex, her eyes blazing with defiance even as she limped away. Covey tried to help her, his small frame supporting her weight as they stumbled back into the jungle. The T-Rex didn't pursue them. It stood in the clearing, its chest heaving as it watched the pack disappear into the shadows. For a moment, its ferocity seemed to fade, replaced by something almost like regret. It let out a low, mournful growl before turning away, its massive form disappearing into the jungle. Sira and Covey led the remnants of the pack to a hidden grove where they could tend to their wounds. The battle had taken its toll, and the pack's future seemed uncertain. But as they huddled together, licking each other's wounds and sharing the warmth of their bodies, a sense of resilience began to grow among them. Covey looked at Sira, his young eyes filled with determination. "We'll survive," he said softly, his voice steady despite his pain. Sira nodded, her gaze softening as she rested her head against his. They had faced the impossible and lived to tell the tale. And though the scars of the battle would remain, they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the strength of their bond could not be broken. The jungle was silent once more, the echoes of the battle fading into the distance. But within the pack, a new resolve had been born. A resolve to survive, to fight, and to protect each other no matter what dangers lay ahead. And as the first rays of dawn broke through the canopy, the raptors rose, ready to face whatever challenges the new day would bring. Let me know if you'd like the next part. Here comes the continuation of Velociraptor Pack Faces T-Rex. What happens next will leave everyone in tears, with another thrilling batch, maintaining the 1,500-word mark. As the first light of dawn pierced through the dense jungle canopy, the surviving velociraptors regrouped in their hidden grove. The humid air was thick with the scent of damp earth and foliage, mingling with the metallic tang of blood still fresh from their battle with the T-Rex. Sira lay motionless at the center of the clearing, her sides heaving as she fought to steady her breathing. Her amber eyes, sharp and commanding even in exhaustion, darted over the remaining members of her pack. Covey sat closest to her, licking a wound on his forearm. The juvenile raptor was battered and bruised, but his gaze remained defiant. His small frame quivered with a mix of exhaustion and an almost childlike determination to prove himself. Around him, the older raptors attended to their wounds, their sharp claws gingerly pulling away debris embedded in their scales. The pack was a shadow of its former self, physically diminished but spiritually unbroken. Sira raised her head, wincing slightly at the pull of torn muscles. "We need to move before nightfall," she rasped, her voice rough yet authoritative. The T-Rex might not have followed us, but we're still vulnerable here. But Sira, one of the elder raptors, Vec, interjected, we're in no shape to face another predator. We should rest, regroup. There's no safety here. Sira cut him off, her tone sharp. This grove is too exposed. The pack's survival depends on finding a new territory, one with enough prey to rebuild our strength. Vec exchanged a wary glance with the others, but no one dared argue. Sira's decisions had always been final, her leadership unchallenged. Yet the weight of their losses was evident in the somber silence that followed. The once mighty pack had been reduced to half its size. Each survivor bore scars, not just on their bodies, but etched into their spirits. Covey, sensing the unease among his elders, stepped forward. I can scout ahead, he offered, his voice steady despite the tremor in his legs. I'll find a safe path, somewhere with water, maybe even prey. Sira's gaze softened momentarily as she looked at the young raptor. Covey had shown immense bravery during the fight with the T-Rex, but his inexperience was still evident. You're not ready to go alone, she replied gently but firmly. We move together. No one gets separated. Covey opened his mouth to protest but closed it again under Sira's unwavering stare. He nodded reluctantly and stepped back into the fold. The pack began to rise, their movements slow and deliberate. Every step was a reminder of their injuries, but the collective resolve in their eyes spoke volumes. They were survivors and they would endure. The jungle was alive with sound as the pack began their trek. Birds screeched from the treetops, and the distant calls of herbivores echoed through the dense foliage. The sun climbed higher, its rays cutting through the mist and casting dappled patterns on the forest floor. Each raptor moved with practiced silence, their claws barely brushing the ground. Despite their exhaustion, their senses remained on high alert. As they pushed deeper into unfamiliar territory, Sira's sharp instincts guided them around potential dangers. The scent of a nearby watering hole caught her attention, and she signaled for the pack to follow. The promise of water and potential prey quickened their pace. But as they approached the clearing where the watering hole lay, Sira abruptly halted. Her nostrils flared, picking up an unfamiliar yet unmistakably threatening scent. The others froze behind her, their bodies tensing as they waited for her assessment. Something's wrong, she murmured, her voice barely audible. Covey crept closer, his youthful curiosity overriding his caution. What is it? He whispered. Before Sira could answer, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The faint vibration quickly grew into a rhythmic pounding, each beat sending a shiver through the air. The pack instinctively dropped low, their eyes darting in all directions. Then, emerging from the dense vegetation on the far side of the clearing, came a herd of ceratopsians. The massive herbivores moved with a sense of urgency, their frilled heads and sharp horns gleaming in the sunlight. Their eyes, usually calm, were wide with panic. Something was chasing them, and then they saw it. The T-Rex burst into the clearing with a deafening roar, its colossal form charging after the herd. The ceratopsians scattered, their powerful legs kicking up dirt and debris as they ran. But the T-Rex was relentless, its predatory instincts honed to perfection. It singled out a slower member of the herd, a juvenile, and bore down on it with terrifying speed. Sira's pack remained hidden, their bodies pressed against the jungle floor. Every instinct screamed at them to stay out of the T-Rex's path. They were no match for its power, especially in their weakened state. But as Covey watched the scene unfold, something inside him stirred. The juvenile ceratopsian cried out as it stumbled, its small frame no match for the predator bearing down on it. Covey's heart pounded as he saw the desperation in its eyes. It was a cry for help, a plea for survival. We have to do something, Covey whispered urgently, his gaze locked on the struggling herbivore. Sira turned to him sharply. No, it's not our fight, but we can't just watch, Covey protested, his voice rising despite himself. If we don't help, it's as good as letting it die. Sira's eyes flashed with anger, but also with a trace of something else, doubt. She knew the risk of intervening, The pack was in no condition for another confrontation with the T-Rex. But Covey's words struck a chord. The pack had always been about survival, but they had also been about loyalty, about standing together in the face of impossible odds. The pack watched in stunned silence as Sira made her decision. With a sharp hiss, she signaled for them to follow. "We move as one," she commanded, her voice firm. "Distract, don't engage. Our goal is to give the ceratopsian a chance to escape." The pack sprang into action, their bodies moving in perfect harmony despite their injuries. They darted out of the underbrush, their sharp cries drawing the T-Rex's attention away from its prey. The massive predator snarled in frustration as the raptors circled it, their swift movements keeping it off balance. Covey took the lead, his youthful energy driving him to dart dangerously close to the T-Rex's snapping jaws. He knew he was taking a risk, but he also knew that every second he bought was a chance for the ceratopsian to escape. "Over here," he called, his voice echoing through the clearing as he darted past the T-Rex's massive legs. The ceratopsian juvenile seized its chance, scrambling to its feet and bolting toward the safety of the herd. The T-Rex roared in fury, its attention divided between the fleeing prey and the infuriating raptors that swarmed around it. Sira barked a command, and the pack began to retreat, their movements calculated and precise. The T-Rex, realizing its hunt had been thwarted, let out a final, bone-chilling roar before turning its massive frame and disappearing back into the jungle. The pack regrouped at the edge of the clearing, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Covey looked to Sira, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and pride. Sira nodded, a small but genuine smile breaking through her usually stoic expression. "Yes," she said softly, "we did. Let me know when you'd like the next batch." Here comes the continuation of Velociraptor Pack Faces T-Rex. What happens next will leave everyone in tears, with another 1,500-word batch. Let's keep the momentum going. As the pack moved cautiously away from the scene of their daring intervention, the weight of their actions began to settle over them. The jungle seemed quieter now, as if the trees and creatures within were holding their breath. Sira, ever the vigilant leader, took point, her movements fluid but deliberate. Her sharp eyes scanned the dense foliage, her nostrils flaring as she picked up faint traces of scent trails left by other creatures. Though their adrenaline had carried them through the encounter with the T-Rex, the reality of their injuries and exhaustion could not be ignored. Covey walked close to her flank, his usually boundless energy subdued. The young raptor was trying to mask a limp, the result of his close call during the earlier confrontation. Despite his exhaustion, there was a fire in his eyes, a spark of pride and determination. He had proven himself to the pack, and though he wouldn't admit it, he felt closer to Sira than ever before. "You were reckless," Sira said abruptly, her tone sharp but devoid of malice. Covey flinched, his head dipping slightly. "I was just trying to help," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Sira stopped and turned to face him, her piercing gaze locking onto his. "Your heart was in the right place, Covey, but you can't let emotion cloud your judgment. This pack relies on discipline and teamwork. We don't survive by taking unnecessary risks." Covey nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, Sira. I'll do better." She regarded him for a moment longer, then softened slightly. "You have courage, Covey. That's something that can't be taught. But courage without control can be dangerous. Remember that." He met her gaze, the weight of her words sinking in. "I will." The rest of the pack had stopped to watch the exchange, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and quiet admiration. Though Covey was young and impulsive, his bravery had not gone unnoticed. In their darkest moment, he had stepped up, and for that, he had earned their respect. The jungle opened up to reveal a narrow stream, its crystal-clear waters glinting in the sunlight. The pack moved toward it eagerly, their parched throats driving them forward. Sira signaled for them to spread out and remain alert while they drank. As they lowered their heads to the cool water, the tension in their bodies began to ease, if only slightly. Covey drank greedily, the refreshing water soothing the burn in his throat. As he lifted his head, droplets clinging to his snout, he noticed something unusual across the stream. The foliage on the opposite bank was disturbed, as if something or someone was watching them. "Sira," he whispered, nudging her with his snout. She followed his gaze, her body tensing as she caught sight of the movement. The pack froze, their eyes darting to the rustling leaves. The jungle seemed to hold its breath once more, the only sound the gentle trickle of the stream. Then, from the shadows, a pair of golden eyes appeared, followed by the sleek form of a raptor, a stranger. The newcomer was lean and scarred, its scales a mottled green and brown that blended seamlessly with the jungle. It stepped forward cautiously, its head tilting as it observed the pack. Sira stepped in front of her group, her body language commanding but non-threatening. "Who are you?" she called, her voice firm. The stranger stopped at the edge of the stream, its eyes narrowing. "I could ask you the same," it replied, its tone wary. "This is our pack's territory," Sira lied smoothly, her gaze unwavering. "You're intruding." The stranger let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in it. "Territory? In this part of the jungle? You must be desperate." Sira's jaw tightened, but she held her ground. "What do you want?" The raptor's gaze swept over the pack, its expression calculating. "I've been watching you," it admitted. "You're injured, weakened. A pack in your condition won't last long out here. And you think you can take us?" Sira challenged, her voice cold. The stranger shook its head. "No, I think I can help you." The pack exchanged uneasy glances, their instincts warning them against trusting the newcomer. Sira narrowed her eyes. "Why would you help us?" "Because I know what it's like to lose everything," the raptor said, its voice softening. "To fight tooth and claw just to survive. I've been alone for a long time. I see strength in your pack, and I want to be part of it." Sira studied the stranger carefully, her instincts battling with her logic. Allowing an outsider into the pack was risky, especially in their vulnerable state. But the sincerity in the raptor's eyes gave her pause. It wasn't a decision she could make lightly. "What's your name?" she asked finally. "Rin," the stranger replied. Sira hesitated, then nodded. "If you betray us, you won't live to regret it." Rin dipped its head in acknowledgement. "Understood." With their new companion in tow, the pack continued their journey. Rin kept to the back, its movements cautious as it adjusted to the group's dynamic. The other raptors remained wary, their trust not easily earned. But Rin seemed patient, offering no challenge to Sira's authority. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the jungle, the pack came across a promising sight, a large, open meadow surrounded by dense foliage. The area was teeming with life, from small herbivores grazing near the edges to larger creatures moving in the distance. Sira signaled for the pack to stop. "This could be it," she said, her voice thoughtful. "A new territory, but we'll need to secure it." The pack nodded, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten as a flicker of hope ignited within them. For the first time in days, the possibility of safety felt within reach. But as they moved toward the meadow, a deep, rumbling growl stopped them in their tracks. From the opposite edge of the clearing, a massive shape emerged, a Carnotaurus. Its sharp horns and muscular frame made it an imposing sight, and its predatory eyes locked onto the pack with dangerous intent. The raptors bristled, their bodies lowering instinctively. Sira stepped forward, her gaze steady. "This is our fight," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Rin, stay back." But Rin shook its head. "I'm part of this pack now," it said simply. "I fight with you." Sira hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close." The pack spread out, their movements synchronized as they prepared to face the Carnotaurus. The massive predator let out a bellowing roar, its powerful legs propelling it forward in a charge. The battle that followed was fierce and chaotic. The raptors used their agility to their advantage, darting around the Carnotaurus and striking at its vulnerable spots. But the predator was relentless, its powerful tail and snapping jaws forcing them to stay on the defensive. Covey found himself face to face with the Carnotaurus at one point, its massive head swinging toward him. He froze for a split second, fear rooting him to the spot. But before the predator could strike, Rin leapt in front of him, its claws slashing at the Carnotaurus's face. "Move, Covey!" Rin barked, its voice filled with urgency. Covey snapped out of his daze and darted away, his heart pounding. He glanced back to see Rin locked in a brutal struggle with the Carnotaurus, its movements fierce and unyielding. The pack fought with everything they had, their combined efforts slowly wearing down the larger predator. Finally, with one last coordinated strike, they forced the Carnotaurus to retreat, its roars of frustration echoing through the jungle as it disappeared into the trees. The raptors collapsed in the meadow, their bodies heaving as they caught their breath. Sira looked around at her pack, her gaze lingering on Rin. "You fought well," she said, her voice carrying a note of respect. Rin nodded, its expression weary but satisfied. "So did you." As the sun set, casting the meadow in a golden glow, the pack settled in their new territory. They had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger for it. And though the scars of their journey would remain, so too would the bond that held them together. The meadow had grown quiet in the aftermath of their battle with the Carnotaurus. As dusk began to settle, the pack remained huddled together, their bodies forming a protective circle. For the first time in weeks, the tension that had gripped them seemed to ease, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. Sira stood at the center, her keen eyes scanning the surroundings. This place could be their sanctuary if they could hold it. Rin, still catching its breath from the earlier fight, sat a little apart from the others. Despite its exhaustion, there was a glint of satisfaction in its eyes. It had proven its loyalty to the pack, and while the others remained wary, they could no longer deny Rin's value. Covey approached cautiously, his movements tentative. "That was incredible," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "You saved me back there." Rin glanced at the young raptor and offered a faint smile. "We're pack now. That's what we do." Covey's chest swelled with pride. He had always been the smallest and least experienced of the group, but for the first time he felt like he truly belonged. "Thank you," he said earnestly. Rin nodded, but its expression grew somber. "We've won a battle, Covey, but the war isn't over. This meadow, it won't stay safe for long. Others will come, and we'll have to fight again." Covey frowned, the weight of those words settling heavily on him. He looked toward Sira, who was deep in conversation with Vec. Their whispered tones carried an urgency that made his stomach twist. He knew that peace was fleeting in the jungle, but a part of him had hoped, just for a moment, that they could finally rest. As night fell, the pack began to settle in for what they hoped would be an uneventful evening. The stars above glimmered faintly through the gaps in the canopy, casting a soft light over the meadow. Sira assigned shifts for the night watch, ensuring that someone would always be on guard. The jungle was never truly silent, and the rustling of leaves and distant cries of nocturnal creatures served as a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the darkness. Covey volunteered for the first watch, eager to prove himself once more. He perched on a small rise near the edge of the meadow, his keen eyes scanning the shadows. The cool night air carried the faint scent of wildflowers, mingling with the musk of the pack's scent markers. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, his gaze drifting toward the horizon where the jungle stretched endlessly. But his reprieve was short-lived. A faint rustling caught his attention, and his body tensed instantly. The sound was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to set his instincts on high alert. He tilted his head, focusing intently on the source of the noise. It was coming from the far side of the meadow, where the dense underbrush provided ample cover for an ambush. Covey let out a low growl, a signal to the rest of the pack. Sira was the first to respond, her sleek form appearing at his side almost instantly. The others followed, their movements silent but purposeful. "What is it?" Sira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There," Covey replied, nodding toward the underbrush. "Something's watching us." The pack formed a defensive line, their bodies low to the ground and their eyes locked on the shadows. The tension was palpable, each raptor poised to strike at a moment's notice. For several agonizing seconds, the jungle seemed to hold its breath. Then the underbrush parted, and a group of raptors emerged. These weren't like Rin. Their scales were darker, almost black, and their eyes glinted with a cold, predatory hunger. Their leader, a massive male with jagged scars across his snout, stepped forward, his movements deliberate and menacing. "Well, well," the stranger drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "What do we have here? A broken pack trying to claim territory that doesn't belong to them." Sira stepped forward, her posture commanding. "This meadow is ours," she said firmly. "If you value your lives, you'll leave." The leader chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill through the air. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. But you're in no position to make threats." The tension escalated as the two packs faced off, their postures mirrored in a standoff that could erupt into violence at any moment. Covey felt his heart pounding in his chest, his claws digging into the earth. He glanced at Rin, who stood at his side, its expression unreadable. Sira's voice cut through the silence. "We don't want to fight, but we won't back down. Leave now, and we can avoid unnecessary bloodshed." The leader's grin widened, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Oh, there will be blood," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "But it won't be ours." The battle erupted with terrifying ferocity. The rival pack charged, their movements swift and coordinated. Sira barked commands, her voice carrying above the chaos as her pack met the attack head-on. Claws clashed against claws, and the air was filled with snarls and cries of pain. The meadow that had seemed so peaceful moments ago was now a battlefield, the ground churned up by the frenzy of combat. Covey found himself face to face with one of the rival raptors, its eyes burning with aggression. It lunged at him, its claws aiming for his throat. He ducked and countered with a swipe of his own, his movements fueled by adrenaline and instinct. The two circled each other, each searching for an opening. Nearby, Rin was locked in combat with two opponents at once. Its movements were precise and calculated, a testament to its experience. Despite being outnumbered, Rin held its ground, its claws striking with deadly accuracy. Sira, as always, was at the center of the fight, her presence a rallying point for her pack. She moved with a combination of grace and power, her strikes deliberate and effective. But even she couldn't ignore the toll the battle was taking. Her injuries from the previous fights had not fully healed, and every movement sent a sharp pain through her body. The rival leader, seeing an opportunity, charged directly at her. Their clash was brutal, their snarls echoing across the meadow as they grappled for dominance. Sira fought with everything she had, but the leader was stronger and fresher. He forced her onto her back, his claws pinning her down. "This is the end for you," he sneered, his jaws opening wide for the killing blow. But before he could strike, Covey leapt onto his back with a fierce cry. His claws dug into the leader's scales, forcing him to release Sira. The leader roared in fury, twisting and snapping at Covey. But the young raptor held on with a tenacity that surprised even himself. Rin seized the moment, launching itself at the leader's exposed side. Its claws raked deep gashes across the rival's flank, forcing him to stagger. Sira, recovering quickly, delivered a final, decisive strike that sent the leader crashing to the ground. The remaining rival raptors hesitated, their confidence shaken by the fall of their leader. Sira let out a thunderous roar, a declaration of victory that sent the rival pack fleeing into the jungle. The meadow fell silent once more, the only sound the labored breathing of the victorious pack. As the silence of the meadow returned, the victorious pack gathered near the center, their bodies heaving with exhaustion. The fight had been brutal, and every raptor bore the scars of the encounter. Sira stood tall despite the deep gash across her flank, her commanding presence rallying the pack in their moment of triumph. For the first time in what felt like ages, they had held their ground and won. Covey limped over to her, his small frame trembling with fatigue. "We did it," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "They're gone." Sira nodded, her gaze scanning the horizon. "For now," she replied, "but they'll be back. Packs like theirs don't give up so easily." Rin approached, its claws still streaked with the blood of their enemies. "Syrah's right," it said, its tone grim. "We've shown them we're not weak, but they'll see this as a challenge. They'll want revenge." The reality of those words settled heavily on the pack. They had fought so hard to claim this meadow, but peace was still out of reach. The jungle was unforgiving, and survival was a constant battle. Syrah's voice cut through their thoughts. "We can't stay here," she said firmly. "Not until we're stronger. This meadow is a prize, and it will draw more predators. We need time to heal and regroup." Covey's heart sank. He had hoped they could finally stop running, but he trusted Syrah's judgment. She had led them this far, and he knew she would do whatever it took to protect them. "Where will we go?" he asked. Syrah hesitated, her gaze drifting toward the distant mountains. "There's a place," she said, "a hidden valley surrounded by cliffs. It's defensible and there's plenty of prey. If we can reach it, we'll have a chance to rebuild." The pack exchanged uncertain glances. The journey would be dangerous, and they were already wounded and weary. But they trusted Syrah, and they knew she wouldn't lead them into danger without reason. "We'll move at first light," she said. "For now, rest. We'll need our strength." The night passed slowly, the pack taking turns on watch to ensure they weren't caught off guard. Covey's shift came just before dawn, and he perched on the same rise where he had spotted the rival pack the night before. The meadow was quiet now, the air cool and still. As he scanned the shadows, his thoughts drifted to the battle. He had never fought so fiercely, and the memory of leaping onto the rival leader still sent a thrill through him. But he also felt a pang of guilt. He had been reckless, putting himself in danger without thinking. If Syrah hadn't acted quickly, he might not have survived. Lost in thought, Rin's voice startled him, and he turned to see the older raptor approaching. Its movements were slow, its injuries more severe than Covey had realized. "I was just thinking about the fight," Covey admitted. Rin nodded, settling beside him. "You fought well," it said. "Better than I expected." Covey blinked in surprise. "You expected me to fail?" "Not fail," Rin clarified. "But you're young, inexperienced. Fights like that, most don't come out unscathed." Covey looked down, his claws digging into the dirt. "I just wanted to prove myself," he said quietly, "to show that I belong." Rin studied him for a moment before speaking. "You don't need to prove anything," it said. "You're part of this pack, and that means you're one of us. But being brave doesn't mean being reckless. You've got a lot of potential, Covey. Don't waste it." The younger raptor looked up, his chest swelling with a mix of pride and determination. "I won't," he promised. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, the pack began to stir. Syrah wasted no time, rallying them for the journey ahead. She outlined the path they would take, emphasizing the need for speed and caution. The hidden valley was several days away, and the jungle was fraught with dangers. The pack set out in a tight formation, Syrah leading the way with Vec at her side. Rin took the rear, ensuring no one was left behind. Covey stayed close to the center, his sharp eyes scanning their surroundings for any signs of trouble. The jungle was alive with sound as they moved, the calls of birds and the rustling of leaves creating a symphony of nature. But beneath the surface, there was an underlying tension. The pack knew they were vulnerable in their current state, and every shadow seemed to hold a potential threat. Their first challenge came in the form of a swollen river. The recent rains had turned the normally calm waters into a raging torrent, the current strong enough to sweep away even the largest raptor. Syrah assessed the situation, her mind racing as she considered their options. "We'll need to cross upstream," she said. "There's a fallen tree we can use as a bridge, but we'll need to be careful." The pack followed her lead, their movements cautious as they approached the makeshift bridge. The tree was slick with moss, and the rushing water below sent a spray of mist into the air. One by one, they began to cross. Covey's heart pounded as he stepped onto the log, his claws gripping tightly to maintain his balance. The roar of the river filled his ears, and he focused intently on each step. Suddenly, a cry of alarm rang out. Rin, who had been bringing up the rear, slipped on the moss and fell sideways. It managed to catch itself with its claws, but its body dangled precariously over the rushing water. "Help!" it called, its voice tinged with panic. Without hesitation, Covey turned back. Ignoring Syrah's warning cry, he darted across the log and grabbed hold of Rin's forelimb. He strained against the weight, his muscles burning as he tried to pull the older raptor to safety. "Hold on," he gritted out. Syrah and Vec rushed to assist, their combined strength finally pulling Rin back onto the log. The older raptor collapsed onto the wood, its chest heaving with relief. "That was reckless," Syrah scolded, her tone sharp. "You could have fallen." "But I didn't," Covey replied, his voice defiant. "And neither did Rin." Syrah sighed, her expression softening. "You have a good heart, Covey," she said, "but you need to learn to think before you act." The younger raptor nodded, chastened but resolute. He had made a promise to Rin, and he intended to keep it. The journey continued, the pack pressing on through the dense jungle. They encountered other challenges: a narrow ravine, a herd of agitated herbivores, and a sudden thunderstorm that soaked them to the bone. But through it all, they worked together, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. As they neared the hidden valley, the landscape began to change. The dense jungle gave way to rolling hills, the air cooler and fresher. For the first time in weeks, the pack felt a glimmer of hope. But their journey was far from over. One evening, as they rested near a cluster of boulders, Syrah sensed something amiss. The air was too quiet, the usual sounds of the jungle absent. Her instincts screamed danger, and she called the pack to attention. "Something's watching us," she said, her voice low. "Stay alert." The pack formed a defensive circle, their bodies tense and ready. The shadows seemed to shift around them, and the faintest rustle of leaves betrayed the presence of a predator. Suddenly, a massive figure emerged from the darkness. It was a T-Rex. The beast towered over them, its golden eyes glinting with a predatory hunger. Its powerful jaws opened in a deafening roar, the sound reverberating through the hills. The pack froze, their instincts warring between fight and flight. Syrah stepped forward, her body trembling but her resolve unshaken. "This is our ground," she growled. "We won't back down." The T-Rex tilted its head, as if considering her words. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The two predators locked in a silent standoff. Then, to their astonishment, the T-Rex did something none of them expected. It bowed its massive head, a gesture of respect. The pack stared in disbelief as the T-Rex turned and disappeared into the jungle, leaving them unharmed. Syrah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her mind racing to process what had just happened. "What just happened?" Covey asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Syrah shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I think," she said, "we've earned the respect of the king." The Velociraptor pack circled tighter, their movements in perfect synchronization. Each raptor's claws clicked against the hard-packed earth, creating an eerie, rhythmic sound that mirrored the rising tension in the air. The T-Rex stood in the center of their formation, unyielding and unshaken, its massive body casting an imposing shadow over the smaller predators. Despite the numerical disadvantage, the T-Rex's unwavering confidence sent a chilling message. This was a fight it wasn't planning to lose. The leader of the raptors, distinguishable by a deep scar running along the length of its snout, let out a high-pitched screech. It was a signal. The pack moved as one, lunging forward in a coordinated attack. Their strategy was clear: overwhelm the larger predator through speed and numbers, exploiting their agility to strike from every angle. But the T-Rex, despite its size, wasn't slow to react. With a thunderous roar, the T-Rex spun around with a surprising swiftness, its powerful tail lashing out like a whip. The strike caught one of the raptors mid-leap, sending it hurtling through the air. It landed with a sickening thud and didn't rise again. The pack faltered for a moment, their tightly knit assault momentarily disrupted. But the leader's piercing cry restored order, and the raptors resumed their attack with renewed ferocity. The T-Rex's jaws snapped shut with terrifying precision, narrowly missing another raptor that darted past its head. Its tiny but powerful arms swiped out, catching a second raptor and sending it sprawling to the ground. The pack was relentless, though, refusing to back down. They darted in and out of the T-Rex's reach, slashing at its thick hide with razor-sharp claws. While the T-Rex's armored skin absorbed much of the damage, small wounds began to appear, each a testament to the pack's determination. But it wasn't enough to stop the T-Rex. With a ground-shaking stomp, it crushed another raptor beneath its massive foot, letting out a victorious roar. The remaining pack members hesitated, their confidence visibly wavering. The T-Rex took advantage of their uncertainty, charging forward with a speed that belied its size. The ground trembled beneath its powerful strides as it closed the distance between itself and the raptors. The pack scattered, each member retreating in a different direction. The T-Rex focused on the leader, singling it out as the orchestrator of the attack. The raptor leader, realizing the danger, sprinted toward the dense foliage at the edge of the clearing. But the T-Rex was faster. With a final, thunderous leap, it brought its massive jaws down around the raptor, ending the chase in an instant. The remaining raptors watched from the safety of the trees, their screeches now tinged with fear rather than defiance. The T-Rex, its dominance reasserted, let out one last earth-shaking roar, a clear declaration of its victory. Blood dripped from its jaws, staining the ground beneath it. But the T-Rex didn't pursue the surviving pack members. It stood tall and proud in the clearing, its amber eyes scanning the tree line as if daring the raptors to try again. The forest fell silent, the only sound the ragged breathing of the T-Rex as it surveyed the aftermath of the battle. The surviving raptors slinked away into the shadows, their challenge decisively defeated. For a moment, the T-Rex stood alone, the king of its domain. But then, something unexpected happened. From the edge of the clearing, a small, lone figure emerged, a baby raptor. Its movements were hesitant, its tiny body trembling with fear. It was clear this youngling had been left behind by the pack, abandoned in their hasty retreat. The T-Rex turned its massive head toward the baby raptor, its amber eyes locking onto the tiny creature. The baby raptor froze, its wide eyes reflecting the towering predator before it. It let out a soft, pitiful chirp, a sound that seemed out of place in the aftermath of such a violent confrontation. The T-Rex tilted its head, a curious glint in its eyes. For a moment, the clearing was still, the massive predator and the tiny hatchling locked in an unspoken exchange. Then, to the astonishment of any onlooker, the T-Rex lowered its massive body, bringing its head down to the baby raptor's level. It let out a low, guttural sound, not a roar, but something softer, almost gentle. The baby raptor hesitated, its tiny claws digging into the dirt as it tried to decide whether to flee or stay. Finally, it took a tentative step forward, then another until it was standing directly in front of the T-Rex. The T-Rex extended its tiny but surprisingly dexterous arm, nudging the baby raptor gently. The hatchling let out another soft chirp, this time one of recognition rather than fear. The T-Rex responded with another low sound, its massive tail sweeping the ground behind it in what could only be described as a gesture of reassurance. From that moment on, an unspoken bond formed between the two creatures. The T-Rex, the undisputed king of the jungle, had chosen to spare the life of the baby raptor, a member of the very pack that had dared to challenge it. It was a decision that defied the laws of nature, a choice rooted not in survival but in something deeper. The baby raptor followed the T-Rex as it moved through the forest, its tiny legs struggling to keep up with the predator's massive strides. The T-Rex, for its part, seemed to slow its pace, allowing the hatchling to stay close. Together, they ventured deeper into the jungle, a pair as unlikely as they were inseparable. In the days that followed, the bond between the T-Rex and the baby raptor only grew stronger. The T-Rex hunted not just for itself, but for its tiny companion, bringing back food and watching over the hatchling as it ate. The baby raptor, in turn, seemed to draw strength and confidence from its new protector. It no longer trembled in fear, its tiny body now filled with a newfound sense of security. Word of the T-Rex's unusual companion spread through the jungle, carried by the whispers of the wind and the curious eyes of other creatures. Predators and prey alike watched in astonishment as the king of the jungle walked side by side with a member of the very species that had once dared to defy it. The T-Rex and the baby raptor became an inseparable duo, their bond a testament to the unpredictability of nature. Together, they defied the odds, proving that even in the harshest of environments, compassion and connection could thrive. Their story became a legend, a tale passed down through the ages, a reminder that even the mightiest of creatures could choose mercy over dominance, and that even the smallest of beings could find strength in the unlikeliest of allies. And so, the T-Rex and the baby raptor roamed the jungle together, their footsteps leaving a trail not just on the earth, but in the hearts of all who heard their story.